https www.youtube.com watch Shek KZMRRQ ONFXQ. Welcome to Bisa Coke, where true stories don't just reveal pain, they reveal power. Meet Nadira Anjani, a woman who built an empire from the shadows of favoritism, betrayal, and being forgotten. She paid for her own celebration, only to watch it be stolen in front of her eyes. But this time, she didn't stay silent. What you're about to hear is more than a story. It's a reckoning, a message to every quiet achiever. You are enough. My name is Nadira Anjani Allen. I was born and raised in a quiet suburb in Oregon. From the outside, my family looked like the picture of middle-class American life. A house with a lavender-filled front yard, a neat white picket fence, and cozy family dinners under warm lighting. But inside, things were far from as pleasant as they appeared. I was the firstborn of my parents, Mark and Linda Allen, both firm believers in modern parenting methods. My father, a software engineer with a passion for math, always dreamed of having a brilliant, exceptional child. My mother, she once told her friends she had read over 40 books on child psychology before I was born. I was brought into this world with high expectations, monitored, measured, and experimented on like a research project. But by the time I turned 3 and still couldn't count to 20 or write my name properly, Boo Kartika's disappointment became obvious. "Mark, I don't think she's capable of learning as fast as we hoped," she said, a mix of frustration and caution in her voice. "We need to intervene early so we don't miss the golden stage." My Pakraka Mahendra just nodded slightly, but I remember how he looked at me that day. Like I was a math problem that yielded the wrong answer, not worth solving any further. When I was 4, my younger sister Clarissa was born. And from that moment on, everything at home changed. Clarissa had a musical high chair, imported fabric books from Sweden, and a private Montessori tutor before she turned 2. And me? I had pre-printed workbooks, a stubby pencil, and daily reminders that I needed to try harder if I wanted to achieve anything. When I was 8, I won second place in the school-wide art competition. I brought my painting home, bursting with excitement. Boo Kartika glanced at it and said, Well, Clarissa read an entire short story in English today." Pakraka Mahendra didn't say anything. He was busy installing a logic puzzle board for Clarissa downstairs. I learned not to expect anything. No praise, no rewards, no proud glances. I slowly became a shadow in my own family, present but never really seen. The breaking point came in the fall of the year I turned 12. I had always had my own room, the upstairs one with the window that overlooked the small forest behind our house, where morning light filtered through the blinds in soft beams. "You're older now. You should learn to give way. Clarissa needs it more." "Don't make a scene, Nadira Anjani." I didn't answer. I walked back in, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The light from the hallway spilled through the crack under the door, pale and unfamiliar. For the first time, I felt it clearly. In that house, I was the afterthought, despite being the firstborn. By the time I reached senior year of high school, life in the Allen household still revolved around Clarissa. She was now a top student at a prestigious private high school, chauffeured in a brand new SUV with a private tutor visiting twice a week. And me? I still attended public school, walked to class every morning, and handled everything on my own, from academics to extracurriculars. I never complained. I was used to being behind the spotlight, but I wasn't prepared for the moment when every last illusion of fairness was shattered right at the dinner table. That night, my grandparents, Arthur and Helen, came to visit. They were the only ones in the family who ever made me feel seen, heard. We were eating Boo Kartika's lasagna, and Clarissa was going on and on about her summer program plans at Stanford. "That's wonderful. Boo Helena smiled, then turned to me. And what about you, Nadira Anjani? Have you thought about college yet? I looked up, for the first time feeling hopeful that I might get to share something of my own. I applied to the University of Oregon and UC Davis. I just got accepted into Oregon's business program. Partial scholarship. If I get more financial aid, then. I didn't even finish before Boo Kartika set down her fork and knife. The sound echoed sharply. Nadira Anjani, she said, her voice tight. Your father and I have talked. We can't provide more help with your tuition this year. I blinked. What? Pakraka Mahendra jumped in as if rehearsed. We need to prioritize Clarissa. She's been invited to an Ivy League prep program. It's a rare opportunity. My heart sank. So all the college savings you said were for both of us are going to Clarissa. Bukartika sighed like she was stating the obvious. Clarissa has real potential. You, Nadira Anjani, might want to consider starting at community college and transferring, or taking time to work isn't a bad option either. Not a bad option? It took me a moment to realize they were completely cutting me off. The room went silent. No one spoke, except for the quiet clink of Boo Helena's spoon against her plate. Linda, she said, her voice low but firm. Both girls are my granddaughters. I can't sit here and watch one be cast aside. Boo Kartika pursed her lips. Boo Kartika, this isn't. Yes, it is, Pa Arthur interrupted. It absolutely is our business. That night, as I was clearing dishes in the kitchen, Boo Helena came over, gently placing a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to carry this burden anymore, she said. We'll pay for your college tuition, all of it. No loans needed. I turned, eyes red. But that's too much money. It's not too much when it's an investment in someone who tries. She smiled gently. You don't need favoritism to shine, Nadira Anjani. You've already done it on your own. That fall, I moved into the dorms at the University of Oregon. The day I left home, Boo Kartika gave me a half-hearted hug at the door and said, Be frugal, and don't expect anything from us. Clarissa didn't even look up from her phone. I stepped out of that house, dragging my suitcase across the front yard path, feeling like I had just opened a new door. One without condescending stares or bitter comparisons. College was a different world. There, I wasn't the average kid, no longer the shadow behind a self-proclaimed genius. What I had now was the real value, one that came from within. I entered my senior year of college with a sense of certainty I had never dared to imagine. Thanks to late-night study sessions in the library, part-time shifts at a small downtown cafe where I learned how customers really think, and hours spent devouring every investment model I could find online. I started to get noticed. One of my finance professors, Dr. Elgin, referred me to a competitive summer internship at a well-known investment firm in Seattle, Bradley, and Lane Capital. I still remember the first interview. Glass conference room, gleaming oak table, and 3 managers sitting across from me, each holding my resume. Zaylin, one of them asked, what do you think is the most important factor when creating an investment strategy? I replied, understanding, not just the data, but the psychology behind it. They glanced at each other and nodded. I got the offer. And from that summer on, everything changed. After graduating with honors and having a research project published in a financial journal, I was offered a full-time role at Bradley and Lane as a junior investment analyst. I worked tirelessly, learning everything from risk reports, shareholder presentations, to how to read between the lines in volatile market charts. 3 years later, during a routine review of a high net worth client portfolio, I discovered something troubling. A group of tech stocks our firm had heavily invested in showed signs of artificial growth. The internal indicators looked unusually strong compared to the overall market. Most analysts saw it as breakout potential. But I didn't. I spent 2 sleepless nights combing through every number, tracing back appendix reports, and finally uncovered the truth. Those companies were inflating revenue through internal transactions, essentially buying their own products to fabricate sales. If we didn't pull out in time, we'd lose at least $32 million 0 cents in client funds. I couldn't stay silent. That Monday morning, I walked into the executive boardroom with a 42-page analysis and a risk simulation model. No one interrupted. When I finished, the CFO sat in stunned silence before turning to the CEO and saying, "She just saved the company." The CEO, Richard Langley, smiled at me once everyone was seated. "Nadira Anjani," he said, "we're creating an entirely new position, Chief Strategic Investment Officer, and no one is more deserving than you." I could hardly breathe. Just 4 years earlier, I was told I might want to work for a while and figure things out later. That role wasn't just a title. It was proof of everything I had overcome, from being the forgotten child in my own family to becoming the one leading the table in a multi-million-dollar firm's boardroom. That evening, I didn't celebrate with champagne or a party. I went to my grandparents' house, a simple red brick home filled with warmth. Boo Helena was baking, and Pock Arthur was making tea. I laid the appointment letter on the table. They looked at each other and smiled. "Little Nadira Anjani," Pock Arthur said, now leading the way. I looked at him, then at Boo Helena, the first person who believed I didn't have to be exceptional to be worthy. For the first time, I didn't need anyone's approval. I had already proven it to myself. With quiet grit, relentless effort, and unwavering belief. After accepting the role of Chief Strategic Investment Officer at Bradley & Lane, I knew I needed to mark the moment. Not with grandeur, but with a small, warm gathering for those who had stood by me. My grandparents, a few close friends, a couple of trusted colleagues. When I mentioned the idea to my mother, she immediately offered, "You should let us host it. Do it at home. Make it more intimate. The family can reunite, too." I hesitated, but she continued, "You just need to send the money for catering and decorations. I'll handle the guest list and everything else." I was unsure, but thought maybe after all these years, this could be our chance to start over. I transferred $3,500 0 cents to her account and didn't ask further. A week later, when I arrived at the old house in Salem, the place where I'd grown up, slowly fading behind Clarissa's shadow, I never expected to walk into a perfectly staged performance. The house was more lavishly decorated than I imagined. White orchids covered the dining tables, soft golden ribbons wound up the staircase, and the scent of gourmet dishes filled the air. I saw my grandparents by the small bar, chatting with a few relatives. Clarissa descended the stairs in a striking red satin dress, face perfectly made up. Walking beside her was a tall, polished man I didn't recognize. People began gathering around, and just as I raised my glass to speak, my mother stood abruptly, beaming. "Dear family," she announced, "we're here today not just to reconnect, but to celebrate something truly special. Clarissa and her boyfriend Andrew are officially engaged." Cheers and applause erupted. I stood frozen. I turned to my mother. Her eyes passed over me like I was just another guest at a party I had paid for. I stepped forward to speak, but my father intercepted, gripping my wrist like a period at the end of a sentence. "Don't ruin this," he muttered, voice sharp as steel. "If you make a scene now, don't expect anything else from this family. No contact, no inheritance, nothing." I pulled his hand off mine and took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to leave, to let them drown in their own play. But the other part, the one that had lived too long in the shadows, refused to stay silent. I returned to the center of the room, raised my champagne glass, and said, "Excuse me, everyone. May I have just a moment?" All eyes turned to me. Clarissa paused mid-step. My mother's brow creased. "This gathering today," I began, calm but clear, was planned to celebrate a major milestone in my life. I was recently named Chief Strategic Investment Officer at Bradley & Lane, a major financial firm in Seattle. I paused, scanning the room. I'm the one who sent the money for this event. My mother agreed to organize it and never once mentioned it would be turned into an engagement party. Murmurs rippled through the room. My grandparents stood still, stunned. I'm not against Clarissa's engagement, I continued. What I can't stay silent about is the fact that my own family tried to erase me from my own moment, just like they did all throughout my childhood. Andrew turned to Clarissa, confusion in his eyes. You told me this was just a family gathering. Clarissa's face flushed. Andrew, I just wanted to wait for the right time. By using your sister's money to stage your big reveal, he cut in, voice lowering. I came here expecting to feel welcomed, not to watch someone be pushed out of their own moment. He set his glass down and walked away. Clarissa chased after him in vain. The room fell into suffocating silence. My father stood, face red with anger. You should know your place, Nadira Anjani. This is still... No, I interrupted. This is a place built on favoritism. It's not a home anymore. I turned to my grandparents. They hadn't moved. Boo Helena's eyes shimmered, and Pa Arthur gripped my hand as I stepped toward them. I don't need the rest of this family to know who I am. And I walked out the door, the same one I had once left in silence. But this time, my head was held high. Andrew left the party without a word, leaving behind Clarissa's panicked gaze and a stunned family. She chased him to the porch, but the car door shut before she could say anything. The Mercedes taillights disappeared behind the trees, leaving the room in a silence that had once been filled with laughter. Clarissa turned back, her tears quickly replaced by fury. You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand seeing me happy, so you destroy everything. I stood still. I didn't respond. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt, just tired. Of the same tired blame, played like a broken record. Clarissa, Boo Helena said, voice calm but sharp. You made your choices. Don't dump the consequences on your sister. My mother rushed forward, face pale with rage and embarrassment. Nadira Anjani, who do you think you are to humiliate your sister in front of our family? I don't need to think, I replied quietly. I just told the truth, and I've stayed quiet long enough. My father grabbed my mother's hand, trying to hold her back, but his eyes were blazing. If you walk out of here today, he said, his voice ice cold, you're no longer part of this family. Don't expect an inheritance. Don't expect to ever call us again. As far as we're concerned, you never existed. I was about to speak when Pa Arthur, who had silently observed the entire evening, suddenly stepped forward, his voice ringing out like a bronze bell in the quiet room. David, if you're going to cut Nadira Anjani out of this family, then it's time we clarify a few things. Bo Helena took his hand and stepped forward with him. My mother looked at them as if sensing something was coming. We updated our will 3 months ago, she said calmly. The entire estate, the house, the savings, the investment shares, it's all going to Nadira Anjani. My mother let out a shocked gasp. What? We've seen enough, Pa Arthur said. Enough to know who lives by their values and who lives off of being coddled. Clarissa is my biological daughter. My mother nearly screamed. Why her? Because she's the only one in this family who never demanded anything, never complained, and never stepped on others to lift herself up, Boo Helena replied, her voice trembling slightly, but her eyes steady. We don't reward favoritism or deceit. Clarissa burst into tears, her pride unraveling. She ran up the stairs, her red dress flaring like a bleeding stroke on a collapsing painting. My mother stood in the middle of the room, lips trembling. My father turned away, silent. I clutched my purse, looking at my grandparents, heart swelling. I never asked for this. I don't need the inheritance. We know, Pac Arthur said, smiling, and that's exactly why you deserve it more than anyone. I looked around the house, once a wound, now a stage for truth to come to light. One by one, the relatives rose from their seats, avoiding my gaze as if they had just awakened from a misguided dream. No one stopped me as I turned to leave. I stepped outside, the spring night breeze brushing my cheek, carrying the familiar scent of apple blossoms from the backyard. I heard the door shut behind me. This time, it wasn't a door slamming shut. It was a final chapter, closing on years of endurance. On the drive back to my grandparents' home, Boo Helena reached over and gently took my hand. "You don't have to fight to prove yourself anymore, Nadira Anjani," she said. "Now you get to just be." I looked at her, eyes stinging. I had never felt so at peace, not because of the money, not because of recognition, but because, for the first time, I had chosen myself over chasing approval from people who never truly wanted to see me. 3 years have passed since that night, the night I walked out of my parents' house for the last time. Carrying the truth, the pain, and the strength I never knew I had. I never looked back and never felt the need to. During those 3 years, I poured my heart into my work at Bradley and Lane. Every early morning before sunrise, every quiet night on the 19th floor, there I was, refining strategy, tweaking the Prism algorithm, listening to the market, and leading my team through moments that once felt impossible. When the current CEO, Richard Langley, announced his retirement, no one expected him to choose me as his successor. But to me, it wasn't luck. It was the result of every effort, every sleepless night, and every hard decision I had ever made. On the day I was officially appointed CEO of Bradley and Lane Capital, I was 30 years old, the youngest female CEO in the firm's 60-plus year history. The announcement took place in the main hall, camera lights flashing, every seat filled with shareholders. I stood on that stage, not to impress, but to represent a new generation, one that doesn't have to be born into glory to create its own. After the speech, I took out my phone and called my grandparents. "I did it," I whispered, voice thick with emotion. Pac Arthur laughed on the other end, and Boo Helena repeated the words, "I'll never forget." "You've always been worthy, Nadira Anjani, from day one." Meanwhile, 40 miles away, in the town of Salem where I grew up, things hadn't changed much. Clarissa was now 27. She no longer wore the engagement ring, nor held a steady job. After Andrew walked away that night, her life spiraled through one failed attempt after another. She dropped a fashion course, saying it was too much pressure, tried being a content creator, but quit because no one gets my style, and eventually moved back in with our parents, into the same room she once took from me. I haven't spoken to my parents since that night. Sometimes my grandparents mention that they've asked about me through mutual friends, but I don't care anymore. I've learned that not every relationship is meant to be kept, especially when it's built on denial and selfishness. Every Sunday afternoon, I visit my grandparents for dinner. We toast bread, flip through old photo albums I once thought were buried forever. Boo Helena still tells little stories from my childhood, and Pa Arthur pretends not to remember them, just so I have to retell every detail. One time, I asked them if they ever regretted leaving everything to me. "We didn't leave it because of what it was worth," Boo Helena said. "We left it to the one who understood the value of choice, the one who chose integrity over convenience, silence when it mattered, and voice when it counted." I smiled, because I knew that was the greatest inheritance they gave me. Not assets, but faith. One spring afternoon, as I was leaving the office after a global strategy meeting, I saw someone waiting in the main lobby. I squinted, then realized it was Clarissa. She looked thinner, her gaze uncertain, but still wore her signature look. Designer coat and polished heels. "I'm not here to apologize," Clarissa said immediately, like a shield. I just want to know how you're doing so well, without anyone lifting you up." I looked at her, not angry, not pitying, because I once had nothing, Clarissa, and that's when I learned to stand on my own. That's something you've never had to do. Clarissa stared at me for a long moment. She said nothing, then turned and walked away. I don't know if she'll ever change, but I do know I'll never go back to being the sister who always yielded, always endured, always stayed silent to keep the peace. I walked back to my office, where my team was waiting to build something new together. And I knew then, no matter where the path starts, as long as you don't abandon yourself, the destination will always be worth it. Nadira Anjani was once overlooked, overruled, and overshadowed. But she chose dignity over drama, truth over silence. And most of all, she chose herself. If this story moved you, leave a comment. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Bisa Cook, the channel where real voices rise. Because in a world that forgets the quiet ones, we tell stories that make them unforgettable. From ignored to CEO, how I stopped being the shadow and became the star. Tittle celebration turned ambush in Mota. What would you do if your own family turned your promotion party into your sister's engagement night? Nadira Anjani, a powerful female CEO, paid for the celebration, only to be erased from it. But this time, she didn't smile and stay silent. She took the mic, and she told the truth. Watch this emotional, raw story of favoritism, betrayal, and how one woman reclaimed her voice in the most unforgettable way. Have you ever been pushed into the background for someone else's spotlight? Share in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe to Bisa Cook, the channel where the unheard finally get heard. I'm family drama, female sibling rivalry, our emotional story, toxic family, truth hurts, self-worth, Mayo story, betrayal, mic-drop moment 4, 22, Kua female CEO, betrayed by family, toxic family story, stolen spotlight, mic drop moment, sibling favoritism, true story, real life drama, family betrayal, women empowerment, overlooked daughter, reclaiming power, jealous sister, party betrayal, emotional storytelling, ignored success, promotion drama, CEO journey, silenced woman, standing up for yourself,